My name is Jason Ton. I'm from Las Vegas. I'm going to be discussing the Informed Consent Forum. The one that I downloaded is from a place called Olive Branch Counseling and Training, because it was randomly readily available. I did match this up with what the ACA recommends in their code of ethics. And also in our reading the current chapter this week that also talked about the informed consent and code of ethics, which is what we've been studying. So the informed consent is a tool to convey information and make sure there's mutual understanding between the client and therapist, between what's going to happen, what we're expecting from the client, what they can expect from us, especially from an ethical perspective, including confidentiality, billing, non-discrimination, diversity, things like that that we want to get make sure that substantial understanding before the actual therapy begins. So what they discuss is their background. They do discuss that they have a code of ethics, and that for insurance purposes they do have to, as far as billing goes, they may have to put some information of some things that are discussed in the counseling session, but as a necessity to for billing to continue the sessions. And also that would be considered protected HIPAA information as well. So that's a benefit to the client if they ask, well, what's going to happen with that? It is still technically protected information. They talk about the relationship with the client. Um, they're talking about discouraging long text, email, stuff like that, that therapy should be face to face. I will talk about that a little later, what happens in those cases. They go into the risks and benefits of counseling. Of course, as we've learned, it's not just a benefit scenario. There are risks to it as well, because relationships will change, and not all those relationships that change, that may not be a wanted change by people. So, particularly if they're in a relationship with an abusive person and they decide to disengage from that relationship, that's probably not going to be met with a lot of joy. So hopefully there are changes in their lives which are beneficial, even though some of those benefits might feel a little tough at the time. So those risks are explained. Talking about working with minors, and that they do prefer that both parents be a part of that. Of course, the minors under 18, so legally their parents do have rights to a lot of the information. And then they talk about confidentiality, which is the really important part. And they describe it as the counselor has a responsibility to safeguard information obtained during treatment. And we're going to be dealing with situations, life situations, which, of course, the more the client feels we're maintaining that confidentiality, the more comfortable they're going to be in disclosure, the more the therapeutic process can really take place. Now, of course, as we've learned, there are limits to that as well, and they definitely list those out. Limits of confidentiality in bold lettering, and they talk about confidentiality does not apply to cases of suspected abuse or neglect of children or the elderly. So it is incumbent upon us to protect them, and so we would convey that as well. Does not imply to harm of self or others. If someone's there, obvious case, and talking about wanting to commit suicide, it would be incumbent on us, fiduciary, to act on their behalf and contact someone to further help them to make sure that didn't happen. So that would limit confidentiality, of course. A mental health professional may disclose confidential information in proceedings brought by a client against a professional, so whatever that means. It may not apply in cases involving legal proceedings affecting a parent-child relationship, and then it may not apply in cases involving a minor child. They also go into a court disclaimer that counselors really do not have therapeutic involvement in an ongoing custody case, which I'm grateful for, because the last thing I want to do is end up on a stand as a counselor and have someone say, hey, where should so-and-so be on Friday or Saturday? That's not really what we're signing up for. So any way we can avoid that, that would be great. Then they go into the fee schedule, payment of fees and fees for declined credit card, stuff like that, just some of the business stuff to pay the bills. Now, the initial intake, which they note is going to be an hour, it's $120. And I would say during that initial intake, that's when we would really discuss this. We're going to discuss confidentiality, the limits of that, If it's spouses, marriage counseling, definitely going to discuss the limits of that. For me personally, I would say I would not keep a secret. If one spouse discloses something to me, that is going to be part of their permanent record if I'm doing a partner counseling situation, because I wouldn't want to be in a place where I'm keeping the secret from one of my clients while I'm counseling them. So I really have to look at the marriage relationship as one client. So I would be extremely upfront like that. Whatever you disclose to me, assume you're disclosing that to your spouse as well in this situation. And then follow-up visits, $90 for a 45 to 60 minute. They talk about missed appointments, copies of records, and they talk about extensive email responses. So if you're in a situation which you are emailing a client and the response becomes extended, whatever that means, there is billing for that because you are taking up the time of a counselor. I would hesitate on long emails like that because you really don't know where they're going to end up, who's going to read them, is someone standing over their shoulder. In those cases, I would be extremely hesitant to engage in that. I would maybe prefer a phone call, but again, I think anytime you're in an electronic communication with someone, the chances of confidentiality being breached go up. And in a lot of cases, you wouldn't really know if it did or didn't. You don't know someone's environment, if someone in the room, someone in the other room, etc. So I think it puts the counselor in a bit of a situation to be concerned in that case. So I would try to avoid that. If you do have an extensive phone conversation, it's $1 per minute as their fees charging, and then they have subpoena charges and issuing subpoenas and travel related charges. Interesting, it's a flat fee, but it's $800 for a subpoena issue, or counseling and training to go over that. So I don't really know what totally that means, but it's a big number, so it's probably not something they're encouraging to do. They do go over consent of electronic medical record and that they will be stored electronically, and health information privacy and policy, that they do require that. And it's required by law. We're all aware of HIPAA. We have it in our personal lives. So I would tell a client that yes, electronically, this is as protected as possible. It is the law that we protect it. It is our every effort to protect it. Can we always protect it? If we're sending it from one place to another, that becomes a bit more difficult because once it's out of our control, anything could ostensibly happen. So I would really make sure to go over it with them as much as I could within that hour. I would rather keep that information within those four walls and on the paper I'm taking notes, and really nowhere else if I had my way about it. And then, of course, written acknowledgement and consent to counseling. They have their name, their legal signature, or their representative if it's a minor. And after that, it's really the time to go over in that first session questions. What would the client, or do they have concerns? What are they worried about? What are my concerns as far as what they disclose to me and what I can and cannot do with that? And just to really make sure everyone is on the same page before we go actually into the next session. I would let them know about the ACA. I would let them know about my supervisor and that they have options if they feel something's taken place during a therapy situation that other people need to know about. Certainly providing them with that tools. And I would think that that would also help the trust factor go way up for them to think, hey, this person is giving me the tools to report them if necessary. So it doesn't look like anything is going to happen out of the ordinary here. It's a professional situation and all bases are covered. And if I have a concern, I can call someone. I know it. He knows it. So it gets really everything out on the table